Stepmom moves into my cabin with her bratty twins and tries to claim it as her own family retreat. When she finds out I actually own the entire property, her face was priceless. What's up, Reddit? So this clusterfuck started when my dad remarried this woman who thought she hit the jackpot. Spoiler alert, she didn't. Here's the whole insane story of how my stepmom tried to steal my inheritance and got absolutely wrecked in the process. I'm 23, male, and this whole mess began about 8 years ago when my mom died in a car accident. I was 15 at the time, dad was completely destroyed, and honestly, none of us knew how to handle losing the most important person in our lives. My mom's parents, my grandparents on her side, had this beautiful cabin up in the mountains of Colorado, about 2 hours outside Denver. It's this gorgeous log cabin on 15 acres of forest land, with a private lake, built back in the 1980s when my grandfather was doing really well in the oil business. After mom died, it just made sense for me to spend most of my time up there with my grandparents. Dad would drive up on weekends when he could handle being around reminders of mom, but mostly I lived with my grandparents during high school. The cabin itself is incredible. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, massive stone fireplace, wraparound deck overlooking the lake, and enough land that you can't even see your neighbors. My grandfather had built this place as his retirement dream home, and it shows in every detail. But here's where Dad started showing his true personality. Even as a teenager, I could see he had this need to control everything around him. He couldn't just let me grieve and heal in peace. Every time he'd come up for the weekend, he'd immediately start making changes, telling my grandparents how they should be maintaining the property, what repairs needed to be done, how I should be spending my time. He'd show up and within an hour, he'd be rearranging furniture, or criticizing how Grandpa was handling the dock maintenance, or complaining about the satellite internet speed. My best friend Tyler lived about 20 minutes down the mountain, so I wasn't completely isolated from people my own age. We'd been friends since middle school, and he basically became my brother during those years when everything fell apart. His family kind of adopted me in a lot of ways, and Tyler's been my voice of reason through all the insanity that followed. Here's the important part that nobody knew except the lawyers. My mom was an only child, and when she died, everything she inherited from her parents was supposed to go into a trust for me. But my grandparents were smart. They saw how my dad was acting, and they changed their wills. When my grandmother died 3 years ago and grandfather followed 6 months later, everything went directly to me. The cabin, the land, the investment accounts, they'd built up over decades. Everything. The lawyers explained it all when I turned 18, but I kept it quiet because I didn't want to deal with the drama. Dad had no idea. He just assumed that since he was my father and was helping with maintenance costs, he had some kind of claim to the place. For years, he acted like he was the man of the house when we were up there, making decisions about renovations, talking about our family cabin, and when I retire, I'll move up here full time. The whole time, I'm sitting there knowing that legally, he's just a guest in my house. Tyler was the only person who knew the truth about the inheritance. When the lawyers explained everything to me on my 18th birthday, Tyler was there for moral support. After we left the lawyer's office, he just looked at me and said, "Dude, your dad is going to lose his mind when he finds out." But we never talked about it with anyone else. About 3 years after mom died, dad started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual stuff. But then last year, he drops this bomb on me. He's met someone special, a 35-year-old divorced mother named Stephanie, who works as a real estate agent. She's got twin 9-year-old boys named Jackson and Mason, and according to Dad, she's exactly what our family needs to move forward. Stephanie has this whole suburban mom thing perfected. She drives a black Range Rover that's always spotless, wears expensive athleisure outfits like she's headed to the country club, and has very strong opinions about organic food, screen time limits, and proper child development. Her twins are these overly scheduled, competitive kids who play travel soccer and take piano lessons and speak to adults like they're giving presentations. The first time Dad brought her up to the cabin, I knew we were in trouble. She walks in and immediately starts doing this thing where she's evaluating everything like she's a potential buyer. She's checking out the kitchen appliances, running her hand along the stone fireplace, walking out onto the deck and commenting about the potential of the space. "This place has such incredible bones," she tells Dad while I'm standing right there. "The location is absolutely perfect, and with some updating, this could be worth serious money." She opens kitchen cabinets, checks the water pressure in the bathroom sinks, and even looks in the master bedroom closet like she's planning to move in. Dad is completely smitten, nodding along to everything she says. "Stephanie has such great vision," he tells me later. "She really understands how to maximize property value." Like we were planning to sell my family's retreat center. Her kids were somehow even worse than she was. Jackson and Mason spent the entire weekend treating the place like their personal playground, with zero respect for anything. They found my grandfather's fishing gear and started casting in the living room. They went through all the bedrooms, opening drawers and closets like they were shopping. Mason found my mom's old jewelry box that I keep in my room and started playing with it until I caught him and took it away. When I told them to be more careful with other people's things, Stephanie jumps in with this patronizing voice. Boys will be boys, she laughs. They're just excited to have so much space to explore. They're not used to having access to this kind of rustic environment. Rustic environment. Like the cabin was some kind of camping trip. Tyler came by that evening and caught the end of their visit. After they left, he found me out on the dock looking at the damage they'd done. Jackson had somehow broken one of the deck chairs, and Mason had left sticky fingerprints all over the sliding glass doors. So, Tyler said, sitting down next to me, she seems fun. Right? Nothing says I respect your family home like treating it like a vacation rental. Your dad looks happy, though, he pointed out. My dad looks like he's having a midlife crisis. There's a difference. But Dad was definitely hooked. Within a few weeks, he's driving up to the cabin every weekend, bringing Stephanie and the boys along like they're part of the family now. He starts spending money on them. Expensive dinners in town, new outdoor gear for the boys, talking about taking them all on some fancy ski vacation over Christmas. 2 months in, Stephanie starts leaving her stuff at the cabin. First, it's just a toothbrush and some face cream in the guest bathroom. Then it's a whole drawer of clothes in the dresser. By month 3, her SUV is in the driveway more often than it's not, and Jackson and Mason have claimed the bunk bedroom like they live there. And the kids, Jesus Christ, these kids transformed from polite little angels into absolute monsters once they got comfortable. Jackson figured out how to push every button I had. He'd wait until I was trying to work on college applications or studying, then start making noise or asking me annoying questions. One day he asked why I didn't have a girlfriend, and when I told him to mind his own business, he informed me that his mom said it was because I was emotionally unavailable due to unresolved grief. Your mom says a lot of things, I told him. Most of them are none of her business. I'm telling, he yelled and ran off to find Stephanie. 5 minutes later, Dad's giving me a lecture about being a good role model and treating Stephanie's children with respect. Stephanie stood behind him with this wounded expression, explaining how important it was for me to embrace the idea of a blended family. Jackson is just trying to connect with you, she said in that therapist voice. Maybe instead of shutting him down, you could try engaging with his curiosity in a more positive way. Mason was worse. He'd go through my stuff when I wasn't around, not even trying to be sneaky about it. I'd come back from town to find him in my room, going through my desk or playing with my gaming setup. When I'd catch him, he'd just look at me with these dead shark eyes and say, Stephanie said I could borrow some paper. Or, I was looking for the bathroom. The bathroom's not in my desk drawer, Mason. You're mean, he'd say, but he'd be smiling when he said it. Stephanie says you're just having trouble adjusting to having a real family again. By month 4, Stephanie had completely dropped the Grateful Guest act. She was rearranging furniture while Dad and I were in town, replacing my grandmother's kitchen towels with expensive organic cotton ones, and throwing away food she didn't approve of. She bought one of those fancy coffee machines and installed it in the kitchen like she was upgrading the place. But the real power move was how she started treating me like I was some deadbeat college kid who was imposing on their family time. She'd make comments about my music being too loud after 9 p.m. because the boys need their sleep and some of us have early meetings. She'd suggest that maybe I should spend more time at the library in town when they had family activities planned. Sweetie, she said one Friday evening while I was doing homework at the kitchen table, would you mind working upstairs tonight? Your father and I are planning to use this space for some adult conversation, and the boys need help with their homework. Adult conversation. In my kitchen. About my house. Dad just nodded along, like this was perfectly reasonable. She's right, son. We need to be respectful of everyone's needs. By month 5, I realized Stephanie wasn't just planning to visit the cabin occasionally. She was planning to take it over completely. She started talking about improvements that needed to be made. The master bedroom needed better lighting. The kitchen could use a complete renovation. The deck needed to be expanded for entertaining. This place has so much potential, she'd tell Dad while I was right there. With the right investments, we could turn this into something really special. The breaking point came on a Sunday in October. I'd driven down to Denver for the weekend to visit Tyler at college. When I came back Sunday evening, I found Stephanie in the master bedroom with paint samples and fabric swatches, completely redecorating my grandparents' room. What the hell are you doing? I said when I found her pulling down my grandmother's curtains. Language, she said automatically. I'm just updating things a bit. This room really needs a more modern aesthetic if we're going to be spending significant time here. You went into my grandparents' room and started redecorating without asking me? I mentioned it to your father, she said, continuing to take down curtains like I wasn't even there. He thought it was a great idea. This place needs some updating, and frankly, some of these old-fashioned decorating choices are bringing down the whole energy of the house. Dad appeared in the doorway like he'd been waiting for this conversation. "What's the problem?" he asked. "She's trying to help make this place feel more like home for everyone." "This is already home. My grandparents' home. You can't just redecorate their bedroom." "Son," Dad said in that patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years, "we all live here now. We all need to contribute to making it a comfortable environment for the whole family." Stephanie stepped forward with this wounded expression. "I'm sorry if you feel like I overstepped," she said. "I was just trying to help make this place feel more welcoming for everyone. Maybe we could work together to find decorating solutions that work for the whole family." I told them I didn't want their help redecorating. I wanted them to put everything back the way it was and ask permission before changing anything in the house. "Watch your tone," Dad warned. "Stephanie is going to be part of this family, and you need to start acting like it." "No," I said. "I don't need to do anything, and you people need to stop acting like you own this place." Dad's face went dark. "That's enough. You need to apologize to her right now." I looked at Stephanie, who was standing there with this perfect victim expression, waiting for me to fold. Then I looked at Dad, who clearly expected me to back down and play along. "No," I said. "I'm not apologizing for being upset that someone rearranged my grandparents' bedroom without permission." Dad exploded. I was being completely disrespectful. Stephanie was trying to build a life with us, and I was acting like a spoiled child who couldn't handle change. Stephanie put her hand on his arm in this supportive gesture. "Maybe we should all take some time to cool off," she suggested. "I never meant to cause problems. I just want us all to be happy together." I told them I was going to Tyler's and walked out. When I got back the next day, there was a note on my bedroom door. "House guidelines for respectful coexistence," with a list of rules including 24-hour notice before having guests over, quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., and shared responsibility for common area maintenance. House guidelines. For my own house. 3 weeks later, I'm trying to write a paper for my constitutional law class when Dad and Stephanie call me into the living room for a family meeting. I'm thinking maybe they're finally going to announce they're officially moving in together. Boy, was I wrong. Stephanie delivers the news like she just got promoted to CEO. "Your father and I have decided to get married," she announces. Dad's grinning like he just won the lottery. Stephanie's glowing with this smug satisfaction that screams, "I've locked this down." Jackson and Mason are sitting there like they've been coached on the appropriate response. "That's great," I said. "Congratulations." But Stephanie wasn't done. She had this whole speech prepared, delivered with the kind of fake enthusiasm that makes your teeth hurt. "We've been talking about our future together," she starts, "and we've realized that we're going to need to make some major changes to accommodate our growing family." Here it comes. With the wedding coming up and the boys needing stable living arrangements, we've decided that this cabin would be perfect as our primary family residence. Your father's lease in Denver is up in a few months anyway, and my apartment is too small for all of us. Primary family residence. She wanted to move into my cabin. "That sounds like a big change," I said carefully. Dad jumped in with the confidence of a man who thought he was delivering good news. "It makes perfect sense financially and practically. The boys love it up here. Stephanie can work remotely, and I can commute when I need to be in the city." "And what about me?" I asked. Stephanie had obviously prepared for this question. "Well, you're 23 now, and most people your age are establishing their own independence. We thought this might be the perfect opportunity for you to experience real adult living." Real adult living. Like living in my inherited cabin was somehow childish. "There's this amazing apartment complex in Boulder," she continued, "right near the university. It would be perfect for someone in your situation, much more appropriate for a young professional." When I asked how much this amazing apartment would cost, she explained that rent would be about $1,800 a month, but she could probably help me get a discount through her real estate connections. "And what happens to this place?" I asked. Dad and Stephanie exchanged one of those looks. "Well," Stephanie said, "this would become our family home. Jackson and Mason need stable rooms, and when we have overnight guests, we'll need the space. Plus, I'm thinking of starting a small business running wellness retreats up here. The location is perfect for that kind of thing." "Wellness retreats. On my property." "That's quite a plan," I said. "Let me think about it." Stephanie's smile got a lot tighter. Of course, but it would be really helpful to have a decision soon. We're hoping to have everything settled before the wedding, and we've already started looking at remodeling contractors." Remodeling contractors. For my cabin. I texted Tyler as soon as they went back to their planning. "Emergency situation. Need backup." He showed up an hour later with beer, and that look he gets when he knows drama is about to unfold. "So," he said, "how'd they take the news that they're trying to steal your house?" "They don't know yet that it's my house," I reminded him. "They think they're being generous by letting me live here all these years." Oh man, Tyler grinned. This is going to be beautiful. 2 weeks after the engagement announcement, I came home from classes to find Stephanie in my bedroom with a measuring tape and a notebook, taking dimensions like she was planning a renovation. What are you doing? I asked. She looked up with this bright smile like I just walked in on her planning a surprise party. Hi, sweetie. I'm just measuring the rooms to figure out the best layout for when Jackson and Mason move in here permanently. Jackson and Mason. In my room. I thought you said they were going to use the bunk room, I said. Well, we've been thinking, she said, continuing to measure like I'd given her permission. This room has the best natural light and the nicest view of the lake. It would be perfect for the boys. You'll be moving out anyway, so it makes sense to give them the nicest space. She held up her notebook, which had detailed drawings of how she wanted to rearrange everything. I'm thinking we'll put Mason's desk by the window and Jackson's bed where your dresser is now. We might need to paint. This blue is very masculine. Stephanie, I said carefully, you can't just move into my room and start redecorating. Oh, honey, she said in that condescending voice she'd perfected. I know change is hard, but this is happening whether you're on board or not. Your father and I have already discussed it, and we think it's best if you start transitioning to independent living as soon as possible. Transitioning to independent living, in my own house. What if I don't want to move out? I asked. For the first time since I'd met her, Stephanie's mask completely slipped. Her voice went cold and sharp. Listen, she said, setting down the measuring tape. I'm marrying your father in 3 months. We're building a life together, and that life includes making this place work for our family. You can either be part of that transition, or you can make things difficult for everyone. But either way, this is happening. This isn't your house, Stephanie. Actually, she said, picking up her notebook and continuing like I hadn't spoken, your father and I have already spoken to a contractor about converting the basement into a separate living space. If you really can't handle the idea of independence, we could potentially work out some kind of arrangement where you rent the basement apartment. Rent the basement in my own house. That's generous of you, I said. She completely missed the sarcasm. I'm glad you're starting to see reason. The basement has its own entrance, so you'd have privacy, and frankly, it would be better for everyone if the main house was available for family activities. That's when Dad walked in, and I could tell from his expression that he knew exactly what was happening. How's the planning going? He asked. Great, Stephanie said. I think we've figured out a solution that works for everyone. Dad looked at me expectantly. I hope you're being cooperative. Oh, I'm learning a lot, I said, about family dynamics and property rights and all kinds of interesting things. That evening, I called Tyler. They want to rent me the basement of my own house, I told him. No fucking way. Stephanie's already measuring my room for her kids' furniture. Dude, Tyler said, it's time to drop the bomb. Yeah, I said. I think it is. The next day, I drove down to Denver and spent the afternoon with the lawyers who handled my grandparents' estate. I wanted to make sure I understood exactly what my rights were and what my options were for dealing with unwanted tenants. Turns out, it's pretty straightforward. Since Dad had been living there without a lease and without paying rent, he was considered a tenant at will. That meant I could terminate his tenancy with 30 days written notice. If he refused to leave, I could file for eviction and have him legally removed. The lawyer also explained that since Dad had been living there rent-free for years, I could potentially sue for fair market rent for the entire time, plus any damages to the property. For a place like the cabin, we were talking about serious money. But I wasn't trying to destroy my dad financially. I just wanted him and his gold-digging fiancée out of my house. Monday morning, I went to a print shop and had official eviction notices made up on legal letterhead. Tuesday evening, I waited for them to get back from dinner in town, then called a family meeting in the living room. We need to talk, I said, setting a folder of documents on the coffee table. Dad was still in his post-dinner good mood. If this is about the basement apartment idea, I think we can work something out that makes everyone happy. Actually, I said, this is about your housing situation. Stephanie was sitting next to him, already looking annoyed that I was interrupting their evening. What about our housing situation? She asked. I opened the folder and pulled out the eviction notices. You're both being evicted. 30 days notice, effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful. Dad picked up his notice and read it like it was written in hieroglyphics. What the hell is this? He asked. It's an eviction notice. You have 30 days to find alternative housing and vacate the premises. Dad exploded. You can't do this. I'm your father. Watch me. Stephanie grabbed the notice out of Dad's hands. This is illegal. You can't evict people from their own home. Actually, I can, because it's not your home. But we don't pay rent, she said, like that was some kind of gotcha. Exactly. You're tenants at will, which means you have even fewer rights than people with leases. Dad stood up, and I could see that vein in his forehead that meant he was about to completely lose it. "This is the most ungrateful, disrespectful thing you've ever done," he yelled. "After everything I've done for you, after everything I've put into this place." "Everything you've put into my place," I corrected. Stephanie was reading through the notice again, and I could see the exact moment she found the part about back rent. "What's this about compensation for unlawful occupancy?" she asked. "That's the lawsuit I'm filing for the rent you should have been paying this whole time. Fair market value for a place like this, calculated monthly for the entire time you've been living here without a lease." Dad asked how much we were talking about. "For you, about $150,000, I said. "For Stephanie and her kids, about $12,000. The color drained from both their faces. "You can't be serious," Stephanie whispered. "Dead serious. But I'm not completely unreasonable. You can avoid the lawsuit by vacating within 30 days and signing an agreement not to pursue any claims against the property." Dad sat back down hard. $150,000? For what? "For living in a house like this for years without paying rent. That's what it costs." Stephanie's voice got shrill. "This is insane. We're going to be homeless. We're getting married in 3 months. Not my problem. You should have thought about that before you tried to steal my house." Dad was quiet for a long time, staring at the eviction notice like it might change if he looked at it hard enough. "Where are we supposed to go?" he finally asked. "Anywhere but here. Maybe that apartment in Boulder that Stephanie thought would be so perfect for me." "That's a 1-bedroom, she snapped. "We can't fit 2 adults and 2 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment. Sounds like a personal problem." That's when Stephanie completely lost it. She started crying. Not sad crying, but angry, frustrated sobs of someone whose manipulation tactics weren't working anymore. "This is so unfair," she wailed. "We were building a life together. We were going to be a family." "You were going to steal my house," I corrected. "There's a difference." Dad finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. "How can you even do this? This isn't your house." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. "Actually, it is. Inherited it from my grandparents when they died. House, land, everything. All mine." The look on their faces was worth everything I'd gone through over the past year. Stephanie stared at the phone like it was showing her an alien language. "That can't be right," she said slowly. "You're just a college student." "This college student owns the house you've been trying to steal." Dad was completely silent, and I could see the gears turning in his head as he realized he'd never actually checked the paperwork from when my grandparents died. "But I pay for utilities and maintenance," he said weakly. "Yeah, on my property, like a tenant. You've been living in my house rent-free for years, and your fiancé just tried to evict me from my own property." Stephanie stood up and started pacing, running her hands through her hair. "This is insane," she kept saying. "This changes everything. The wedding, the house, all our plans." "Yeah," I said. "Funny how property ownership works." Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had that dangerous edge it got when he was really pissed off. "Fine," he said. "It's your house, but I'm still your father and you're still going to show me respect." "Actually, no, I'm not. You just tried to force me out of my own house to make room for your girlfriend's kids. Respect is earned, and you just lost all of mine." Stephanie was still pacing. "You little shit," she finally said. "You have no idea what you've just done. Do you know how much money we've put into this place? How much planning we've done? Maybe you should have asked the actual owner before making those plans." "This isn't over," she threatened. "Yeah, it is. You have 30 days. Tyler showed up the next morning with coffee and donuts, asking how they took the news. "About as well as you'd expect," I told him. "Lots of crying, threats, and disbelief that actions have consequences." "Your dad, too?" "My dad's having an existential crisis about having been living in his son's house for years without knowing it." "Beautiful," Tyler said. "Justice is a dish best served with legal paperwork." The next month was absolutely incredible to watch. Dad tried everything. Lawyer consultations he couldn't afford, emotional manipulation about being my father and this being our family home, even attempted bribes about signing the house over to me officially and calling it even. Newsflash, I already owned the house. Stephanie went completely scorched earth. She called the university to complain about my unstable home environment. She called the police to report a domestic disturbance when I asked her to move her car. She even tried to call Adult Protective Services, claiming I was creating an unsafe environment, which backfired when they pointed out that maybe she shouldn't be living somewhere she felt unsafe. Finding housing for an unemployed real estate agent, her 2 kids, and a 50-year-old construction worker, all on Dad's salary, turned out to be harder than they thought. Week 3, Dad suggested maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. He could pay me rent to stay, market rate. Make it official. "No," I said. He started to argue, but I cut him off. "Nope, you had the chance to treat me with respect and have an adult conversation. Instead, you tried to force me out of my own house to make room for your girlfriend's wellness retreat business. Actions have consequences." "But I'm your father," he said. "Yeah, and you're also the guy who tried to evict me from my own property to make room for Jackson and Mason's bedroom furniture." That's when the real fireworks started. Stephanie filed a complaint claiming I was discriminating against families with children. The hearing was beautiful. Stephanie had to explain that she was Dad's fiancée, had been living there for months, had no lease, and paid zero rent. Then I got to tell the judge how they tried to force me out of my own house and convert my bedroom into her kid's room without my permission. The judge basically told her, "You can't claim housing discrimination when you're being evicted for trying to illegally evict the actual property owner." Case dismissed. But the real bomb came during week 4. I was at Tyler's place studying for finals when Dad called. His voice sounded weird, shaky. "We need to talk," he said. "About what? You've got 1 week left to move out." "About Stephanie. Can you come home? I need to show you something." I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in the past month. He slid a paper across the table. "Background check results." "Stephanie isn't who she said she was," he said quietly. I stared at the paper. "Credit report, criminal background check, employment verification." "What do you mean?" Dad had done his homework, finally. Stephanie hadn't been a successful real estate agent. She'd been fired from 3 different agencies for ethics violations. Her credit was destroyed from debt and bankruptcy. And the best part, she'd been married twice before, both times to older men with property and money. "She's done this before," Dad said. "Found men with assets, moved in fast, tried to take control of their property." "How did you find this out?" "I finally got suspicious when she kept pushing so hard about the cabin. I hired a private investigator to check her background." "Where was she now?" "Gone. I confronted her yesterday with all this information. She tried to deny it at first, then claimed it was all misunderstandings and bad luck. When that didn't work, she said I was being paranoid and controlling." "And the boys? Back with their father. Turns out she didn't have primary custody like she claimed. He's been looking for them for months." I almost laughed. Even caught red-handed as a con artist, she'd been lying about her kids. "So what happens now?" I asked. Dad was quiet for a long time. "I screwed up," he finally said. "I chose a woman I barely knew over my own son. I tried to kick you out of your own house for someone who was running a con on me from day one." "Yeah, you did. I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. But I'm hoping maybe we could work something out. I don't have anywhere to go, and I know I don't deserve any help from you, but..." "No." The word hung in the air between us. "You made your choice. You chose her over me. You tried to force me out of my own house. You called me disrespectful and ungrateful for not wanting to be homeless. But I'm your father." "Yeah. And I'm your son. Didn't stop you from trying to evict me." Dad looked down at the background check results. "I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway." I thought about it for a minute. About everything we'd been through, about Mom, about the years of him trying to control everything around him. "You want to know what I think?" I asked. He nodded. "I think you're a 50-year-old man who got conned by a professional because you were thinking with your ego instead of your brain. I think you were so desperate to feel needed and important that you ignored every red flag she threw up. And I think when it came down to choosing between your con artist girlfriend's fake family and your actual son, you chose wrong." Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. He started to say, "It was exactly like that. You just got caught." Dad was quiet for a long time. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now you move out like we agreed." That night, Dad moved into a motel in town. He came back the next day to get his personal stuff and left behind all the furniture he'd bought, all the improvements he'd made, everything he'd invested in the house that was never his. Tyler came over the day after Dad left, bringing pizza and beer. "So," he said, "you think you'll ever forgive him?" "Maybe," I said, "but not today. And not because he got caught being an idiot. Maybe because he finally realized what he did wrong." "Fair enough," Tyler said. "So what's the plan now?" "Finish college, enjoy living in my own house without anyone trying to steal it. Maybe get a dog." "Sounds like a plan." And that's where we are now, Reddit. Living in my beautiful cabin, finishing my senior year remotely, and enjoying the peace and quiet without any gold-digging stepmoms or their bratty kids trying to take over my life. Dad and I talk occasionally. He's renting a small... Tyler's been helping me research property security and legal protections, because apparently this kind of scam is more common than you'd think. Women and men who target people with assets, move in fast, establish residency, then use legal leverage to extract money or property. The fact that Stephanie had done it before just proves how calculated the whole thing was. The background check also revealed that Jackson and Mason weren't even her kids full-time. She had supervised visitation only because of concerns about stability and truthfulness, according to the custody documents. She'd been using them as props to seem like a wholesome single mom when she was actually a serial con artist with serious credibility issues. I feel bad for Dad in some ways. He was lonely and vulnerable after Mom died, and Stephanie played him perfectly. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make him feel needed and important. The compliments about his wisdom, the deference to his opinions, the way she made him feel like a provider and protector. It was all calculated to get him to trust her with his living situation and finances. But I don't feel that bad, because when push came to shove, he chose her over me. He was willing to throw me out of my own house to make her happy. That's not something I'm going to forget anytime soon. The legal aftermath was actually pretty straightforward. Dad moved out within the 30-day deadline, so I didn't have to follow through on the eviction or the lawsuit. He signed a document acknowledging that he had no claim to the property and agreeing not to pursue any legal action. In return, I agreed not to sue him for back rent. I did make him pay for the professional cleaning and minor repairs needed after Stephanie's improvements. She'd painted over some of my grandmother's original decorative work and replaced several light fixtures without permission. Getting everything restored to its original condition cost about $3,000, which seemed like a fair penalty for letting his girlfriend redecorate my house. The most satisfying part was getting to keep all the furniture and appliances Dad had bought for the cabin over the years. The expensive coffee machine, the new outdoor furniture, the upgraded sound system, all of it stayed with the house. Technically, he could have taken it, but I think he was too embarrassed to fight over property after everything that happened. Tyler and I threw a party to celebrate my independence once Dad was officially moved out. A bunch of friends from college came up for the weekend, and it felt incredible to finally have my space back. No more walking on eggshells around Stephanie's mood swings. No more dealing with Jackson and Mason destroying my stuff. No more house rules posted on my bedroom door. I've been thinking a lot about trust and family dynamics since this whole thing went down. It's wild how quickly people can show their true colors when they think something valuable is at stake. Dad lived in my house for years, benefited from my inheritance, let me pay for repairs and maintenance, and never once thought to check who actually owned the property. And Stephanie's plan was actually pretty sophisticated when you think about it. Move in gradually, establish residency, get engaged for legal leverage, push out the inconvenient stepson, then take control of a valuable mountain property for her business venture. If Dad had actually owned the cabin, she might have pulled it off. The wellness retreat thing was particularly galling. She was literally planning to use my family's private retreat to make money off other people, without ever asking my permission or offering to share the profits. She saw this beautiful private property and immediately started calculating how to monetize it. I've learned a lot about property law and tenant rights through this whole experience. Apparently, letting people establish residency in your home, even family members, can create legal complications if you ever need them to leave. From now on, anyone who stays here long-term is going to have a written agreement spelling out the terms. The private investigator also found evidence that Stephanie had been researching property values in our area and looking into zoning regulations for commercial use. She wasn't just planning to live in the cabin, she was planning to turn it into a business. The wellness retreat idea wasn't some spontaneous inspiration. It was a calculated plan to profit from property she thought she could control through marriage. Dad's been going to therapy, apparently, trying to figure out how he got so thoroughly manipulated. The therapist told him that people like Stephanie are experts at finding and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. They know how to make their targets feel special and needed while slowly taking control of their lives and resources. I'm not ready to have a relationship with Dad yet, but I do appreciate that he's taking responsibility for what happened. He's not trying to blame Stephanie for everything or claim he was an innocent victim. He acknowledges that he chose to prioritize her wants over my needs, and that he was willing to force me out of my own home to make her happy. The hardest part has been dealing with extended family and family friends who think I was too harsh. Some people believe that family should forgive and forget, that I should have given Dad another chance, that Stephanie was the real villain and Dad was just misled. But here's the thing. Family doesn't get to treat you worse than strangers just because you share DNA. Dad wouldn't have tried to evict a tenant to make room for his girlfriend's kids. He wouldn't have let a girlfriend redecorate a tenant's bedroom without permission. He wouldn't have told a tenant to move to the basement so his girlfriend could use the main house for her business. The fact that I'm his son made him think he could treat me worse, not better. He assumed I'd just accept whatever decision he made because he was my father. He never considered that I might have legal rights or personal boundaries that deserved respect. Tyler's been amazing through all of this. Having someone who knew the truth about my inheritance from the beginning meant I had a witness to how crazy the whole situation got. He was there when Stephanie was measuring my room for her kids' furniture. He saw her treating my family's cabin like her personal renovation project. The best part, Tyler said last week, is that she thought she was so smart. She had this whole elaborate plan worked out, and she never bothered to check the one thing that would have told her it was impossible. Property ownership records are public, I pointed out. She could have looked it up online in 5 minutes, right? But she was so confident in her manipulation skills that she never thought she needed to do basic research. I've also learned to appreciate my grandparents' wisdom in structuring the inheritance the way they did. They saw how Dad was acting after Mom died, the control issues, the assumption that he had authority over their property, the way he made decisions without consulting anyone. They made sure the cabin would go directly to me to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. If the inheritance had gone to Dad first, or if there had been any ambiguity about ownership, Stephanie might have been able to claim some kind of legal interest in the property through marriage. My grandparents' estate planning prevented that possibility completely. The cabin feels different now, lighter, more peaceful. I'd gotten so used to the tension and conflict that I forgot what it was like to just relax in my own space. No more worrying about coming home to find someone rearranging my room or making new rules about how I can use my own house. I've been spending more time outdoors, fishing in the lake, hiking the trails on the property, just enjoying the natural beauty that drew my grandparents to this place originally. They bought this land as a retreat from the stress and politics of city life, and that's exactly what it's become for me again. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if Dad had approached the situation honestly from the beginning. If he'd said, "I'd like to bring Stephanie and her kids here sometimes. How do you feel about that?" Instead of just moving them in and expecting me to adapt. Or if Stephanie had been upfront about her intentions. I'm interested in your father, partly because of his lifestyle and assets. Instead of pretending to be a loving girlfriend while secretly planning to take over my inheritance. But dishonesty was central to both of their approaches. Dad lied to himself about how much authority he had over the cabin. Stephanie lied about her background, her finances, her custody situation, and her long-term plans. When your whole strategy is based on deception, you're eventually going to get caught. The financial aspect still blows my mind. Dad had been living rent-free in a property worth probably $800,000 in one of the most desirable mountain locations in Colorado. Even if he'd been paying market rent, he'd saved hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. And his response to that generosity was to try to kick me out to make room for his girlfriend's business venture. I've started charging Dad market rate for storage of the personal items he left behind. He's got boxes of tools and sporting equipment in the garage that he hasn't figured out how to move to his apartment yet. I figure if he wants to use my property for storage, he can pay for the privilege like anyone else would. The legal research I did during the eviction process taught me a lot about property rights and landlord-tenant law. I'm actually considering adding a legal studies minor to my degree program. There's something satisfying about understanding exactly what your rights are and how to protect them. I've also been documenting everything that happened, keeping copies of all the legal paperwork, photos of the damage Stephanie did to the cabin, records of the money Dad spent on unauthorized improvements. If either of them ever tries to make any legal claims in the future, I want to have a complete paper trail showing exactly what happened. Tyler thinks I should write a book about the whole experience. Rich Kid versus Gold Digger, he calls it. Property law, revenge fantasy. But honestly, I just want to move on and enjoy my life without having to think about manipulation and legal battles all the time. The hardest part now is rebuilding trust. Not just with Dad, but with people in general. When someone you're supposed to be able to trust tries to steal your house, it makes you question everyone's motives. I find myself being more suspicious of new people, more protective of information about my assets and living situation. But I'm working on it. And in the meantime, I've got my beautiful cabin, my best friend Tyler, my college degree to finish, and all the time in the world to figure out what comes next. Dad calls sometimes, usually when he's had a few drinks and wants to apologize again. I listen, but I don't engage much. Maybe someday we'll rebuild our relationship, but it's going to take time and a lot of work on his part. Trust, once broken, doesn't just automatically repair itself because someone says they're sorry. The most important thing I've learned is that you don't owe anyone access to your life or your resources just because they claim to care about you. Real love doesn't come with demands to give up your security for someone else's convenience. Real family doesn't try to steal your inheritance. Stephanie's gone, Dad's in his own apartment dealing with the consequences of his choices, and I'm here in my beautiful mountain cabin, finally at peace. And that, Reddit, is how my stepmom tried to steal my house and got absolutely destroyed in the process.